ago, I was going through a very difficult period in my life, and in a moment of quiet desperation, I decided to register for a 6-week meditation course to help me cope with some of the anxiety and some of the emotions that I was experiencing. After that, I was eager to learn more, so I also registered for a 2-day silent meditation retreat. And the things that I learned from the course and from the retreat have had such a profound impact on my life. And these are things I want to share with you today. Now, as a disclaimer, I am not a meditation guru or expert, and it's also not in my philosophy to do things in a way that feels strict or extreme. So I'm just going to encourage you to do what feels good. And I love the yogi who taught our course because he shared a very similar philosophy. He was always just encouraging us to do our best because essentially he didn't want to scare us away from all of the benefits of mindfulness and meditation. Now also keep in mind that I am packing 6 weeks of information into 3 very short videos. So I'm also going to encourage you to take the time after each video to really relish in the moments. I've also split it up into 3 videos to give you the opportunity to practice each of the steps before you delve into learning some new ones. Now, in case you're wondering, the type of meditation that I learned is called Vipassana meditation. Vipassana just means insight or awareness or mindfulness, but I'll explain this more as we get into it. For now, just enjoy it as the guided meditation that it is. I hope that you find this as useful as I did to learn. Now let's get started. Alright, so begin by finding a comfortable seat. Some yogis say it matters how you cross your legs, but because we're beginners, let's just find any seat that feels comfortable and that puts you at ease. Place your hands either on your knees or in your lap, whichever you prefer. I like to place one hand on top of the other, palms facing upward in my lap, with the thumbs touching, aligned with my nose. But again, we're beginners, so just do what feels good. If you have some kind of injury, do what you need to do to find support. This might mean propping up your back, sitting in a chair, supporting your knees with a pillow, or keeping your legs straight. Ultimately, you know what feels best for your body. And if you have no injuries, try to find a seated, upright, cross-legged position that feels most comfortable. Once you find a comfortable seat, you want to sit up straight, but you also don't want to forcefully elongate. That just doesn't feel natural and you'll get tired very quickly. You also want to make sure you're not rounding through your neck, so just press your chin back a little bit. And now close your eyes and find some calm. Once you've found a grounding position, we'll aim to hold it. So through the meditation process, we don't want to fidget or move. This can be the hardest part, but it gets easier with practice. Now, if you're new to meditation, you may find that after a few minutes, your leg might go numb, fall asleep, or start to tingle. Ideally, you want to ride this feeling out, but if you really can't and you feel you need to move, we'll cover the techniques on how to go about doing this in a mindful way in the 3rd video of this series. For now, just find a comfortable seat and hand positioning and hold it. Finally, tune in to the sensations. It all comes down to the breath. Take a moment to tune into your natural breathing rhythm. You don't need to take longer inhales or more forceful exhales. Just breathe as you normally would, in and out through your nose into your belly. Now, usually when we're unconscious of the breath, we breathe into the chest, which is more often how one breathes when in a fight or flight response. Breathing into the belly sends relaxation signals to the mind and mimics the breath when we are at rest, like when we're sleeping. Have you ever watched a baby breathing? The belly visibly rises and falls. Breathing into the belly also helps to gently massage the internal organs and helps us become more aware of the sensations in the abdomen. The beauty of Vipassana is that it allows for moment-to-moment investigation of the mind-body process through a calm, open, and compassionate awareness. We learn to observe our experience from a place of spacious stillness, which enables us to experience clarity and insight into the nature of who we are. So now we become aware of the breath. When breathing in, you feel that your abdomen is rising, and when you exhale, you feel your abdomen is dropping. Now all I want you to do is label this breathing. So as you inhale, you say silently to yourself in your mind, rising, rising, rising. And as you exhale, you say silently to yourself in your mind, falling, falling, falling. Simply describing the rising and falling motion of the belly as it happens. So you continue, rising, 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 and falling, falling, falling. Remember I said that it always comes down to the breath. So if your mind has wandered for a little bit and you become aware of it, simply bring that awareness back to the breath, continuously labeling it. Rising, 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 falling, falling, falling. Alright, so I'm going to pause it there so we have a brief moment to recap. In this video, we've really just learned the basics, which is essentially to find a comfortable seat and to remember to always return to the breath, labeling it as the abdomen rises and as it falls. Pretty simple, right? But now the question is, what do you do if certain sensations or emotions arise, or if certain thoughts enter into the mind while you're meditating? This is something we're going to dive into in the next video, so stay tuned for that one. Alright, I'm going to sign off now as my teacher always did by saying metta, always. Metta just means in loving kindness and directing well wishes towards other people. So we're going to say it together now. Are you ready? Metta, always. Part 2 of this 3-part meditation series. If you missed part 1, I will link it for you in the description box just down below. You're going to want to make sure that you watch that before you dive into this one. All right, let's continue where we left off, shall we? So let's briefly summarize the first video. You find a comfortable seat, focus on the breath as the abdomen rises and falls, labeling it as you inhale and exhale. Now, a lot of people feel, and my previous self included, that meditation means emptying your mind completely, not having any thoughts at all. What I was enlightened to learn is that in this form of meditation, you aren't trying to stop the thoughts from coming in, but rather you're just observing them. So let's say you're mindful of your breathing, labeling it as we did before. Rising, 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 falling, falling, falling. But suddenly a sensation snaps you out of the mindfulness of breathing. This sensation might be hearing a car driving by, smelling food being cooked in the kitchen, feeling your leg go numb, or maybe you can see in your mind an image of a tropical beach. Whichever of your senses is being called on, simply label it. So you might label it listening, smelling, feeling, or seeing. By labeling it, you become aware of it. You acknowledge it, you observe it for what it is, without allowing yourself to go into deeper thought. So we aren't thinking, oh, I smell something. I wonder what he's making for dinner. Did he remember to use all the carrots? Maybe I should go check. No, this is not observing, this is actively thinking. So instead, we just label it for what it is and continue to label it without letting your thoughts wander mindlessly. When you do this, you'll see that the sensation will pass, and when it does, we bring the focus back to the breath, rising and falling. Oh, and now you suddenly hear something, but don't explore it, just observe it and label it. Listening, 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 or you might even call it hearing, hearing, hearing. It doesn't matter what you call it, so long as it makes sense to you. Observe it, then let it go, and return to the breath. Now, what happens when a thought enters into the mind? Not just a sensation, but a thought. Maybe you're thinking about something that happened in the past, like a mistake you made earlier in the day. Or maybe your mind is wandering to the future, thinking about what you're going to be making for dinner later. Or maybe your mind is wandering to an imaginary world where you've just won the lottery. Whatever it is, just as we did before, we're going to become aware of it and label it. So let's say we're focused on the breath, rising and falling, and suddenly we remember a silly thing that we did earlier in the day that really embarrassed us. Instead of delving deeper into this feeling and feeling even more foolish for what we did, we just label the experience instead. Remembering, remembering, remembering. Continuing to repeat this until we become mindful of the fact that it's just a thought. We don't judge the thought, we don't label the thought as good or bad or try to make sense of the thought. We just observe it in a detached manner. After a few seconds or moments of labeling, the thought will pass, which again allows us to bring the attention back to the rising and falling of the abdomen. If the thought is of something that might happen in the future, you can simply label it planning, or if it's something you're daydreaming about, perhaps you can label it imagining. Now, this meditation allows us to empty the mind of plans and memories. It allows the thoughts to flow away as they do, so we can focus on the rising and falling movement happening right now, because all we've really got is the now. In the moments where you're aware of only the breath, you allow the mind to be still, allowing it to rest in those spaces. In a way, this is how we empty the mind, not by actively willing it to be empty, but rather by becoming aware of the breath, honoring the passing sensations and thoughts, letting them go, and then returning to the breath. All right, so in this video, we've built on the basics of the seated position and always returning to the breath by also learning what to do when certain sensations arise or when certain thoughts enter into our minds while we're meditating. We've learned to separate ourselves from those sensations, thoughts, or emotions simply part of this 3-part meditation series. If you've missed parts 1 or 2, I'll link those both for you in the description box below to watch before you get started on this one. Now let's continue where we left off. Let's summarize again. We find a comfortable seated position, bring the focus to the rising and falling of the abdomen, and if sensations or thoughts arise, we simply observe it in a detached manner, label it, let it pass, and return to the breath. But now, what happens if you're in some kind of discomfort? Maybe your leg is starting to fall asleep, or something is irritating your throat and you want to cough. So what do? Ideally, you label the sensation as we did before and let the feeling pass. Numbing or tickling sensations often do pass. But with that said, as a beginner, you might not want to sit through such discomfort. So for those of us who are new to meditation, we're going to learn how to move when in a seated position with intention. And the key word here being intention. So let's use an example to demonstrate. You're focusing on the breath, rising and falling, and suddenly this gets interrupted by a tickling sensation on your nose from a stray piece of hair. You label it feeling, or tickling, or nose. Again, there's no right or wrong labels to use. You're just using the labels to guide you in becoming more aware and mindful in the present moment. So you observe the sensation and continue to label it, waiting for the feeling to pass, but after some time, it just won't go away, and you make the decision to move it. But you will label this decision intention, intention, intention. So basically, you're honoring the intention to do something, which in this case is to move that piece of hair off your nose. Now that you've silently stated the intention, you don't just go ahead and move it. Instead, you intentionally move, labeling and feeling every motion as your hand makes its way from your lap to your nose. Labeling, lifting, 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 as your arm makes its way very slowly to your face. We'll break apart every movement into a series of smaller steps, labeling as you go along. So for example, feeling the weight of gravity on your arm. And when the hand makes contact with a stray piece of hair, you can label it contact. Then you continue to feel and label all sensations as you move the piece of hair away from the face and tuck it behind the ear. And as the hand lowers back to the lap, and as you feel every sensation as it slowly lowers, you label it lowering. When all is said and done, observe your sensations and feelings for a moment, then return to the breath, and as always, rising, 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 and falling, falling, falling. This practice can also be applied if you realize you're no longer sitting in an upright position. Maybe you've noticed that you're arcing your back, or you want to elongate your spine again. You don't just pop up and let it be done just like that. You do it instead mindfully, placing the intention to do so and feeling every vertebrae stack on top of one another as you gracefully lift the crown of your head towards the sky and gently tuck in the chin. Remember that with meditation, everything is mindful and intentional. Now, a question commonly asked is, how long should I meditate for? And I don't think that there's necessarily a right or wrong answer to this. I would say pick any amount of time that seems reasonable to you. So if you're just starting out, 5 or 10 minutes at a time is admirable, and you can always increase the frequency and the duration that you're meditating. Once you get a little bit more comfortable with it. Now, I'll be completely honest and say, I don't make time for seated meditation every day, but I am absolutely mindful every day in the way that I go about my day-to-day activities, because I bring those lessons and techniques that I learned in meditation along with me, and I feel that this is how meditation has helped me above all else. So for example, if I'm stressed out because of an upcoming deadline, I remind myself to become aware of my breath. I identify my thoughts and feelings as being stressed, but I make sure not to label myself as a stressed person. I take a moment to stop, observe, and place an intention before I set out to do anything else. When I'm doing mundane activities like cleaning around the house, I try to tune into the different sensations and feelings. So for example, if I'm doing the dishes, I take the time to enjoy that moment, feeling the warmth of the water and the slipperiness of the soap. So you can see how learning these techniques can help you far beyond the 5 or 10 minutes you dedicate to seated meditation. Alright, so this concludes our 3-part meditation series. I hope that you get a chance to put some of these techniques into practice and that you find it as helpful as I know I did. And I'm going to sign off as my teacher always did by saying metta, always. Metta just means in loving kindness and directing well wishes towards others. So we're going to say it one final time together now. Are you ready? Metta, always.